right now his hip is blocking the bottom of my shin. I don't have a leg extension at the moment. So just dropping down.
That totally just changed everything.
And just extending my leg.
All right, hey everyone, I am here with my instructor Rob Biernacki, and we are talking about calf slicer defense. So I've done 2 videos so far talking about calf slicer defense from the truck position, which is where I think one of the more stronger versions of the calf slicer exists. We're going to be talking about the bullshit arm in calf slicer that I think is complete hot garbage. We have seen it done before.
Yeah,
Long
if you're one of these people who doesn't like science, like let's just have our trigger warning now, because I am going to discuss the scientific method and how a single instance of something doesn't necessarily mean validation of that thing. So.
All right, yeah. So calf slicer, we saw this version with the arm in, and just so you guys know, we're talking about this version where the arms cross, if you come up onto your knees, arms through, connecting. I'm looking to triangle my legs so that I can collapse his foot to his butt here down at the ankle, have my foot all the way here at his hip, so maximizing the leverage in this position so that I can triangle, so that now I can do a compression lock where I'm going to connect my arms together and pull into the back of his knee while I can press his heel to his butt. Why are you tapping? Is it uncomfortable at least?
So, story time. I actually had this happen in a match. In an elite no-gi division where like all submissions were allowed, heel hooks, etc. And I came up on top of the guy's guard. He went to do this, and I just looked at him and was like, Are you done? Can we do some jiu-jitsu now? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, dude, go nuts. Like, I wasn't gonna expend any energy on it because obviously there was no threat, so I didn't really need to defend it. And the rules were kind of weird. They're like, it wasn't advantages. You'd get like a point for a submission attempt. So if you defended the submission at all, you were conceding a point. That wasn't going through my head necessarily, but and then I think I ended up heel hooking the guy like about 20 seconds later. But yeah, it was definitely, so like from a personal experience, empirical, like I happen to not think that this works.
No, we had Sean Roberts.
Yeah, let's discuss
In 2012, there was a brown belt kumite.
Yeah.
And I think he submitted several people with this.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen it since.
Right, so this is where we get into like, for those of you who aren't familiar with the scientific method and think that science is a monolith and like, ooh, science said this one day and it said another thing another day, therefore science is invalid. I can go back to believing my dumb shit and lizard people and all that nonsense. This is extremely important nowadays because there are a ton of fuckwits in the jiu-jitsu community that are promoting dumb fuckery and science denial, and we need to stand against it.
Not gonna get to do ad revenue on this video.
Yeah, there you go. We'll go back to what we were discussing before we filmed. Anyway, so the idea is that one instance of something doesn't necessarily prove the overall theme. It's a single data point, right? The same way that like one scientist coming out and saying one thing, if you've not heard the term peer review, you can look up the term peer review. Science is subject to this, right? Where if you publish your findings, like I believe this, and here's my data, and then other scientists are going to come in and basically shit on it. They're just like, no, well, I don't think this is true. And then the way that something becomes part of an established body of knowledge is there's a process of peer review, and then the results are replicated. So in this case, what we're talking about is the results have not been replicated since. Again, that's not to say that nobody ever calf slices anybody. It does happen. And certainly if the methodology changes and all of a sudden people start hitting calf slicers a lot, like this version of it anyway, we will change our mind because that's how science is supposed to work, right? So like the other calf slicers that we talk about, which we still think are lower percentage,
they are more dangerous.
They are more dangerous, and they're certainly they're mechanically much more feasible than this one. The straight ankle lock is a really good example of a technique that 5 years ago would be like, no one taps the straight ankle locks, and now fucking black belts in the world championships tap the straight ankle locks because the technology has advanced. So Mikey Musumeci and Rodrigo Cavaca, there are guys out there who are hitting straight ankle locks at the elite level. It's still not like super high percentage, but it's high percentage enough that it is definitely is part of the overall body of knowledge that like that's super legit. This is not part of that body of knowledge. This is a single instance that we can think of with one practitioner who had some success against guys who were not particularly familiar with
Sean
leg
Roberts,
locks.
very legit grappler, so I don't want to
Yeah.
take away from his wins back in the day because
No, not at all.
I didn't even know much about jiu-jitsu back then when I was training German jiu-jitsu, and I still heard about it.
Yeah.
But this was a guy that was very good, and I think he could have probably beat the crap out of these guys in multiple other ways, to an extent.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we're getting into a territory now of like correlation versus causation and all this kind of like it's probably like beyond the scope of our expertise to say why those guys tapped, other than to give you our hypothesis, which is a lot of these guys were IBJJF guys.
Brown belts.
Brown belts
Locks just become legal now.
Exactly. Nowhere near as familiar. We've seen over the course of time when you have a informational asymmetry between a leg lock expert and somebody who isn't too familiar with leg locks, that taps can come very, very quickly from some people, and then you go up against other people, and all of a sudden you're not getting taps with the same techniques, which is why you've seen funneling of a lot of expert leg lockers into favoring very specific positions that favor the reverse heel hook as opposed to the outside heel hook, etc. etc. Like, you know, we can go down a rabbit hole with this, but basically we're just saying that the instances of this version of the calf slicer were pretty narrow, with one practitioner where there was informational asymmetry and a very simple, obvious explanation as to why these things work, especially when you consider that we haven't seen it outside of that context.
And at a higher level.
And exactly. So that would be why we would have this opinion.
Yeah. So now, as I've talked about when it comes to calf slicers before, they can absolutely still be dangerous to people, and even this one could still potentially be dangerous to some people. So the biggest thing is, are you able to comfortably sit on the heels of your butt? Because what we're essentially trying to do is compress our opponent's heel to their butt while we have a wedge right in behind the knee, so that we're able to cause compression and hopefully do some damage. I, for many years, couldn't sit on my feet, and I still can't if I'm not warmed up. And so if somehow, and we'll talk about some of the defenses to prevent it, someone was able to do it, I might be able to do it. Yeah.
I can not only sit
and
on
you
my
can lean all the way back, too.
I can do this.
And so now we have a submission that's based on flexibility of our opponent in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And where a calf slicer, we're using our shin bone in behind our opponent's knee. And so my shin is considerably bigger, a larger wedge, than my forearm, especially the blade of my forearm. And so when we're using such a tiny wedge, I think that makes the braking mechanics even less likely to be successful when we're talking about this calf slicer.
Yeah, and when we get into the length of the lever that we're attacking and how small the fulcrum is going to be in here, if I had shorter, stubbier legs, you might actually be able to create a little bit more separation. But again, because my legs are so long, you put something narrow in here, there isn't enough of an opening here to create significant damage. And again, we're not saying necessarily no damage. One of the things that is important to like discuss when we talk about this kind of stuff is the experience of the vast majority of practitioners is very different than the experience of elite competitors. The vast majority of practitioners, if something kind of hurts, you're going to tap, and you should, because you have a job. One thing we haven't mentioned as far as like factors contributing to the people in that brown belt Kumite tapping is they were there and they knew they were going to have a crap ton of matches throughout the event, and that contributes to a different mentality when it comes to tapping. You know you need to preserve your body. You know you're going to have multiple matches throughout the day. Also, it was a round robin event, which means that it's not one loss and you're out. So there were like every single factor that could possibly contribute to somebody tapping a bit early on a submission and not being as knowledgeable of that. Those were all factors in that particular event, versus an event where it's one and you're out, where people are definitely not going to tap till the last second, where people have elite leg lock knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many factors contributing to that again, we can get down rabbit holes when we're considering it. So just understand that as the average practitioner, even something that we're saying, this isn't that big a deal, you're also saying, hey, this can still injure you. We're not saying that these don't work at all. We're not saying that this is fictional. We're not talking about shooting chi at people. There is a mechanical submission here that can injure your knee. How likely is it to do so depends on some factors. The ones we're discussing right now are going to reduce that likelihood. But in training, I certainly hope the last thing that goes through your mind is, man, this is kind of painful. But Rob and Rory said this isn't a real thing, so I'm gonna not tap right now. That should not be a thought process that you go through. If something's uncomfortable, tap, because as regular practitioners, and as any kind of practitioner in training, your main job is to keep yourself safe. In competition, you might be willing to weigh the risk of an injury versus you being up on points and know that, like, I've been here before. I've tweaked my knee from this. I know I'll be fine in 3 weeks and let it ride. That's a very different calculation you're making as a competitor than it is as a practitioner in the training room.
Absolutely. So it's important that you guys actually try and experiment on this with each other so that you can develop proper defenses to it so you can have an understanding. We don't ever drill this. I wouldn't dedicate time to this because of the reasons we're talking about. It also doesn't tie into any other submission systems, because usually when you see this being set up, you don't have any other options to it, or you're doing it. I've seen some people teach this as a defense against the leg drag, which is extremely risky, and it's the wrong mindset and everything. And so let's just talk about quickly, like, defense here. I have to have both my legs on the outside. I'm not controlling the inside space, so I have no follow-ups to this. It's kind of a Hail Mary. I'm connecting here. I guess the first part is, can I even collapse your leg?
Yeah, like, let's look at it simply as a battle between his bicep curl and my, like, leg extension. I should relatively easily be able to just hang out here and not allow this to happen.
Yeah.
But if it does, I also should be able to return. So if he starts to go here, I should still just be able to extend my leg and uncurl his bicep. Like, the first thing that's happening is he's trying to get his bicep curl, and then he's got to connect his hands. Even at this stage, my leg extension is greater than his ability to contract. And if we are in an open rule set, you played yourself. Like, this is a bad, like, you got the bad hand in poker. So just know that out of a leg drag where my thigh is up here, this shouldn't be a concern. And even if your knee gets put fairly far in here, as long as we don't end up with my foot trapped under his butt, I should still be able to extend out. And I'm just literally just doing a leg extension here. I'm not particularly strong.
That hip mobility is key too, because yeah, there's going to be a battle of strength here if you try to just extend the leg. And the position of Rob right now, he's not in a very good position to be able to extend his leg.
Yeah, this is like, right now his hip is blocking the bottom of my shin. I don't have a leg extension at the moment. So just dropping down.
That totally just changed everything.
And just extending my leg.
Oh man.
All right. If we're in a gi rule set or a more restrictive rule set, this would be a pretty good solution now to start coming back up into the leg drag. So if you're thinking of counter leg locking, go ahead.
And then, so that's the first stage when we stopped. That's kind of what my first video was with the calf slicer against the truck position. Don't allow them to compress your leg. But if they do, then we actually want to start relaxing this leg so that we make everything more flexible and pliable. So that now,
this is
one, see what the limit is, because here we'll sit here and just.
Yeah, like, I might, depending on, like, I might have a sore knee. I might have, like, my calf might be a little bit tweaked. Like, on my left leg, I've got a little bit of a, like, sore connection here. Like, if he was doing this on my left leg, I'd be tapping right now. So, like, the circumstances dictate.
What I really don't like about this from my perspective is, look how close you are to being able to control my head.
Yeah. So now if we're talking about what do I need to do to defend this, other than just relaxing and, like, seeing where the limit is. Like, this is uncomfortable. I'm not, like, I don't want to be, like, poker face guy here right now. Partially because I hate that fucking song. But this is more where I want to be. So his extension with his hip now should be non-existent.
And you're going to start cross-facing me and breaking my alignment.
Yeah, I mean, again, in the gi, we've got, like, Ezekiel chokes and shit like that you could be going through. There's even, like, no-gi punch chokes, like diesel squeezle, that kind of stuff could be a possibility here. So, and as I open up his posture and extend my leg, like...
And I'm not just losing a battle here, I'm getting passed.
Yeah.
Deeply. Where other leg positions, as we've seen, like, the evolution of just, like, leg locks in general, we're looking at hierarchy of positions, standard ashy, outside ashy, backside 50-50, 411, etc., where it's not just leg locks. We're able to control our opponent. We're able to deny the base. We're able to threaten passing. We're able to threaten back takes. We're able to change stuff together. This doesn't tie in with any of that.
It doesn't do any of that, yeah.
And so, as I've talked about with some of these, the videos that I've done before, guys, it's really important that you work on techniques that are based on some evidence and realism. and also tie into other systems that you're able to efficiently train stuff and have it tie in together and round out your game set. Whether it's white belt, you start practicing this stuff, or blue belt, you're able to tie this in together with your other stuff all the way up to black belt. You keep just leveling up your skills rather than hitting these areas where all of a sudden, which I've had, where I've had to just let go of techniques and be like, I've just wasted a year of my life dedicating time to these things.
I think a good phrase to keep in mind when it comes to stuff like this, like if you want to have a filter or an evaluation process, is judge a technique not by how well it works when it works, judge it by how well it works when it fails. So, in this case, if this fails, you've been leg dragged, you've been smashed, et cetera, et cetera. If you get someone's back and you go for a rear naked choke and it doesn't work, not the end of the world. And then there's a huge scale in between those. This is why outside Ashi is fallen out of favor in the leg lock communities, because it's one of those like, if I get this, cool. If not, I get my back taken and I get styled on, right? So there are definitely techniques that are like at every end of the spectrum. Like this would be way to the far side of like the bad side of the spectrum, where like, if I get this, cool, I have a submission that works some of the time against some people who aren't as flexible or as experienced, and a bunch of like, the list of factors that goes into this working is pretty high. The list of things that goes into this not working is also quite high, flexible, experienced with leg locks, good path, understands it, and again, if it fails, you're fucked. So there's a mentality of having Hail Mary type techniques that can work from bad positions. So if that's how you want to like file this and then work on it from there, sure.
Yeah, as long as it's with a realistic expectation. But I still think, like, as I had mentioned, where it's shown against something like the leg drag.
Yeah.
We're switching from a mentality where you should be thinking defensively and looking at performing guard retention movements and recovering position, keeping your alignment, doing everything. Even if you're going to get your guard passed, land with being in strong frames and positioning and bottom side control so that we're able to defend. Because at least, like, if everything was going completely to shit and this leg drag's happening 100% and I land here, and Rob at least hasn't solidified me in a position where I'm in broken alignment and completely vulnerable. Where if I go here and I start thinking, this is my time to attack, not only am I losing, I'm giving back exposure, I'm getting cross-faced, I'm putting myself in just a horrible position.
When it comes to these kinds of Hail Marys, like, let's give an example that's a pretty decent one. The ghost escape from side control that goes into the Darce.
Yes.
Like, that's not bad. It's like, you gotta have some crazy attributes usually to make it.
And you're already in a bad position at that point.
Yeah, like you've already been passed.
We're just talking this one here where the arm goes underneath like this, and I'm looking to ghost escape out the back, and then be able to start throwing into the Darce.
Yeah, like that's a decent Hail Mary. You don't want to build your side control defense off of that. You don't want to be the guy who like lets people get to side control so you can hit this move. That's whack. And we got a guy at the gym that I try very hard to talk out of this because he's got crazy attributes to make it work. And this is where again we talk about you got to analyze objectively why something is succeeding. If something's succeeding because you're 6'5" and an unreal good athlete, and you're doing it on people who are weaker than you, you've got to be honest with yourself. You got to look in the mirror and say, like, I'm the asshole. And this, like, if you meet one asshole, maybe you met an asshole. If you met 5 assholes throughout the day, you're probably the asshole. So look in the mirror, kind of thing. So yeah, like that's one of those situations. This is an example of something that just like, again, shouldn't really work under most circumstances, and certainly don't go there to set this up. Don't be like, let somebody leg drag me so that I can do this move, because...
Yeah, so don't be ignorant to this. Check it out. Work on it for a little bit, just so that you have some understanding of how to apply it, so that then when you work on shutting it down, you're able to shut down a somewhat competent, shitty submission.
Yeah.
And then don't touch it again, really. Like start.
Well, and to be honest, like if you happen to be at if you're already like a pretty elite leg locker and you're at a school with elite leg lockers and you play with this and you find a way to make it work, then cool.
Great.
Then great. Then we're gonna have to like sit down and do another video in a year or two, and people start hitting this at tournaments. Be like, well, we were wrong, and we were wrong for these reasons, and these were the factors that we had, and this is how they changed. which is fine. Like that's how knowledge is supposed to
That's
grow.
the scientific
That's the
method,
scientific
absolutely.
method,
I have some people that are like, well, as soon as this happens, I'm going to rub it in your face. Or if you get capsizing competition, it's like, one, I'm not like the elite.
We're
level
not the
black
standard,
belts.
yeah.
We're not the standard. But also, as like this scientific approach, if I observe something new changing, I'm like, okay, cool. Like this isn't me trying. This isn't us going out and trying to rub this in people's faces and tell you that this is garbage and trying to crush your feelings. This is just looking at a bunch of different tools that we have, and I'm just looking at this one tool, which is this calf slicer, and going, this one's not as effective as the other tools I have access to.
Yeah, like
Now,
objectively using all the standards that we've discussed, this isn't something you should be spending very much time on. If somebody goes down a rabbit hole and makes changes with this, then cool. I mean, like that's the crucible of progress. But the person who's going to make those changes is going to be somebody who's really good at leg locks. It's not going to be some blue belt who's tapping people in his IBJJF rules gym who don't know anything about leg locks and they're like, yeah, this move is awesome. You're not the guy who's going to revolutionize the game. It's going to be Craig Jones who figures this out. It's not going to be,
Yeah. So to the three of you that are still watching this video at this point, if you guys got any questions, anything that you want to discuss, there's obviously a lot of talking points to this, so hit us up down in the comments and we'll try and respond to whatever we can. It's not like that. Not today.
trying to keep the business open through COVID. It's been tough. Not gonna lie.
Tough times.
Tough times.
Tough times for Rob.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable for me.